Daniel Ricciardo will join Red Bull as their third driver for the 2023 Formula One season. Will the Australian replace Perez in Red Bull? Ricciardo was released from his contract with McLaren at the end of 2022 F1 season, and he was unable to secure a full-time race seat with a competitive team for the upcoming season. He was eager to maintain a role within F1 and will now join the world champion Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez at Red Bull. The 33-year-old will be responsible for performing testing, working on simulators, and commercial responsibilities. After leaving Red Bull in 2019 because he believed the team was concentrating too much on Max Verstappen, he drove for Renault for the next 2 years and finished on the podium twice throughout that time. Ricciardo moved to McLaren in 2021, but he couldn't match up with his teammate Lando Norris, even though Ricciardo scored the team's first win in 9 years at Monza. When McLaren announced Ricciardo's departure from the team, there was just one spot available with the team that was in the top half of the grid. That seat was with Alpine. The other teams were Haas, Williams, and AlphaTauri, and the Honey Badger was not interested in competing for a team that wasn't a podium contender. Ricciardo made it clear on multiple occasions that his objective for 2024. He was adamant about not accepting a reserve role with any other than a top team, with Mercedes apparently being in the hunt for him before he later signed for Red Bull. Mercedes and Red Bull were the two teams that he and his management spoke to. It made sense to link up with one of the top two teams, with those two potentially having seats free in 2024, based on current contract situations with drivers of both teams. Ricciardo's team concentrated their conversations on Red Bull, the team with which the Australian won 7 of his 8 Grand Prix victories, and it is clear why they did so, given the likelihood that Lewis Hamilton will prolong his tenure at Mercedes. Also, he is familiar with a good number of people who work at Red Bull, and he recalls feeling very at ease while driving there in the past. After sealing a deal with Red Bull, Ricciardo stated that he was excited about his new work for Red Bull and that he chose to take a year off from racing rather than take a seat with the team that was at the bottom reaches of the grid. He said, "I'm truly excited to be coming back home. For me, the ability to contribute to and be surrounded by the best team in F1 is hugely appealing while also giving me some time to recharge and focus." Since Helmut Marko prematurely revealed the return of Daniel Ricciardo during the weekend of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the question of whether or not he has a chance of replacing Sergio Perez has been asked. Not necessarily right away, but sometime in the next couple of years at the very least. As things stand now, there are no openings at Red Bull before the year 2025. It is not possible for Ricciardo to replace Verstappen, not only because he is the defending double world champion, but also because he is under contract with the team until the end of 2028, while Perez recently signed an extension of his deal that runs through the end of 2024. The only way for Daniel Ricciardo to drive for Red Bull would be for one of the other drivers to quit, whether voluntarily or because they were forced out of the team. And Red Bull has been quick to dismiss the possibility of it happening. Christian Horner expressed his pleasure at Ricciardo's return, but made it very clear that the Australian driver would not be considered to take Perez's seat. Horner said Daniel's contract is very specific for a specific reason. "We have a contract with Checo for the next 2 years. Christian Horner also emphasized the specificity of Daniel Ricciardo's contract, as well as the fact that Sergio Perez is under contract for the next 2 years, and he stated that there is no reason to anticipate that the relationship between Perez and Max Verstappen will not remain strong for the duration of their contractual commitments. Ricciardo, on the other hand, believes Red Bull provides him with the best opportunity for a comeback in 2024. Therefore, he either believes there is a remote possibility of a racing seat, or he intends to utilize his year with Red Bull as a stepping stone to join another team after the season is over." And while Horner tried to rule Ricciardo out of a future race seat, Ricciardo himself didn't. Ricciardo said, "To be with a top team like Red Bull would be nice, but it's not a guarantee that just because I'm there, that's the seat I'm taking. I think that's still just being affiliated with the team and trying to get some work done. Some testing perhaps just to keep me sharp would be good." There could be a wider conversation as well, perhaps with other teams, but that's a few layers removed for now. On the side of Red Bull, the team will want to get more out of Ricciardo's comeback than just some nice PR. Even if the team doesn't come right out and say it, it's in Red Bull's best interest to at least consider Ricciardo as a serious contender for the driver position. Red Bull may have had no intention or reason to consider Ricciardo as a possible replacement for Perez when negotiations with Ricciardo first began. However, things are not the same as they were back then. Red Bull went into the final race weekend off the back of a controversy in Brazil, where Verstappen refused a team order to help Perez because of an incident that occurred earlier in the year. Recently, tensions inside the team have come to the surface as a result of allegations that Perez intentionally crashed during qualifying for the Monaco Grand Prix. This allegedly helped Perez beat Verstappen that weekend, which led to a dispute regarding team orders many months later. However, there were tensions behind the scenes at Red Bull between Brazil and Abu Dhabi, despite Verstappen claiming that everything was back to normal before the season's final race. Inevitably, a theory emerged in the F1 paddock suggesting that Ricciardo has either already been targeted as a more harmonious option to soothe the Verstappen camp, or that Red Bull might use the potential threat of turning to Ricciardo as a tool to control Perez. The final weekend of the season was a mixed bag for Perez. His performance in qualifying was of a standard that Red Bull could have no objections to. He was ahead of Ferrari and a couple of tenths behind Verstappen. Then he had a slightly scrappy Grand Prix with a couple of mistakes, combined with an inferior strategy born from Perez not being able to eke out his tyres like Verstappen could. Perez lost second place in the race and the championship to Ferrari Charles Leclerc. On balance, there is not much of a motive for Red Bull to consider replacing Perez. Since he joined the team in 2021, he has won 3 races for them, and he has fit into an environment that brings out the best in Max Verstappen. He was also a major contributor to Red Bull's first triumph in the Constructors' title since 2013. But if there is any hint of internal unrest between the drivers, then his performance level alone will not be enough to save him, not in Verstappen's team, given Perez is playing second fiddle. Former driver turned pundit Ralf Schumacher reckons Verstappen would rather have the Aussie as his teammate. Schumacher said not 100% sure that Perez will still be the teammate next year. I think Ricciardo has a good chance. Behind the scenes, it must be very, very aggressive. And I think Max wants a new combination. Max is now the spearhead of Red Bull. I could imagine his contract also gives him the opportunity to have a say in who drives next to him, and I think he prefers Ricciardo. Even if there is the possibility that Perez might lose his seat, there is no assurance that Ricciardo would be the frontrunner to succeed him. However, by bringing Ricciardo back into the fold, getting him on the simulator and putting him in a car during testing, Red Bull will be able to conduct an accurate evaluation of a driver who Horner has repeatedly suggested may have just suffered a temporary loss of form as a result of a particular set of circumstances while driving for McLaren. McLaren are to replace Ricciardo next season with his highly rated fellow Australian Oscar Piastri. What are your thoughts on the possibility of Ricciardo replacing Perez? Do you think we might see that happening soon? Let us know in the comments section below.